worst thing you can do is wait and do nothing. I want to emphasize, build on the kids' strengths.
You're listening to Parenting in the Rain podcast, episode 45.
Welcome to Parenting in the Rain Insights from the Experts podcast, providing parents all around the world with valuable knowledge to help with the biggies of family life. Here's your host, a registered play therapist, education specialist, parent coach, and my mom, Jackie Flynn.
Hi there, Jackie Flynn here. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Parenting in the Rain podcast. Well, I haven't had an episode out in a while because I took a break for Christmas and New Year's, and it was great. But I feel absolutely energized to be back with you here on this episode. I missed you guys. I hope you had a great holiday season as well. I'm excited about 2017. I'm excited about my new play therapy community that I'm getting ready to launch. Woohoo! I already have the website up, so if you want to check it out, playtherapycommunity.com. It's just a place where child therapists can really collaborate and inspire and share information with each other to help us all be better therapists for the clients that we work with. All right, so I'm super eager to get this episode out. Specifically, it's with Dr. Grandin. You may know her. She's absolutely such an inspiration to so many people around the world, including myself. She has written a lot of books on autism, and she also has autism herself. And she mentioned some of the books in this episode, Thinking in Pictures, The Autistic Brain. There's a book that she wrote, Emergence Labeled Autistic. She also mentions Unwritten Rules of Social Relationships, The Way I See It, Different Not Less. There's so many books, so I'm going to have a lot of links in the show notes, so you can find those at parentingintherain.com. But she is absolutely amazing. In this episode, she's going to provide us with some great tips that really helps us to raise kids that have an autism spectrum disorder with a sense of purpose and a strong work ethic and drive, so they can just go on to thrive in so many areas of their life, emotionally, socially, and occupationally. Now, I first heard about Dr. Grandin through a friend of mine, Stephanie Sanders. And you may remember Stephanie Sanders from episode 28. I love her and her work. She's the author of The Filter Approach. I worked with her when I was a school counselor, so we got to work with many of the same kids. So I've seen her work firsthand, how much it helped kids. So her book, The Filter Approach, is on social communication skills. And I remember when it was in a binder. So to see it in publication and really hear people around the world benefiting from her work is just amazing. And she's amazing. So I'll have a link to her book in the show notes as well. Before we jump into my conversation with Dr. Grandin, I want to tell you about my colleague, Robert Cox. He has a new podcast coming out, Listening to Autism, and it's free like this one. So if you are an iTunes user, you can subscribe to it and you'll get little messages when a new episode comes out. But it's also on Google Play. He'll have it at his website, liferecoveryconsulting.com. And Stitcher Radio and a few other places too. He's a former podcast guest of mine as well. He had an episode teaching kids with ADHD and autism spectrum disorder to calm their chaos through mindfulness. That was episode 24, so you can find that at parentingintherain.com. His new podcast, Listening to Autism, is the name of it. He brings on a lot of professionals that really kind of just really speak to how to help people with autism, the spectrum disorder. He's been working with people with autism for 24 years. That's a long time. And he really he looks at it through a lens that is new to me, but it fascinates me. I'm so excited about this. It seems like such breaking edge stuff. He makes that connection between autism and trauma. Now, as a registered play therapist, I work with and have worked with many kids with an autism spectrum disorder. But as a trauma therapist, I see that connection. There's a lot of trauma that's involved with having an autism spectrum disorder. Maybe different from the way you think of trauma. When many people think of trauma, they think of car accidents. Certainly that is a trauma, or divorce, or being a victim of a horrible crime. That's definitely a trauma. That's a big T trauma. And there's also little T traumas, those little things that really kind of rock our world. But he really makes that connection of how that integrates and how that can really guide a treatment that can make a difference. So if you get a chance, check out his new podcast, and he's writing a book too that I'm real excited about, The Life Recovery Method. Okay, so I'm not going to make you wait any longer. Here's my conversation with Dr. Temple Grandin.
Well, the first thing is it's a huge spectrum.
Yes.
I was just recently visiting NASA. And you have to have a little bit of autism genetics to have the kind of engineers you're going to have to figure out how to fly to the moon. Mm-hmm. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got somebody who cannot dress themselves. So you have this huge spectrum. That's the first thing. And you basically have two types. You've got early onset. That was me. No speech until age 4. And then you've got the kid that's sort of the Asperger kid, socially awkward, that's diagnosed in 3rd or 4th grade. So you've got this great big spectrum. Mm-hmm. And with you have young kids that are not talking, the first thing you better do is get them into therapy. The worst thing to do is wait and do nothing. I want to emphasize, build on the kid's strengths. My ability in art was always encouraged, and that became the basis of my design business. Mm-hmm. Build on strengths. That's real important. Mm-hmm. And I discussed that in some of my books, animals, not the animal books. I'm doing animals tomorrow at a veterinary school, and I've got thinking in pictures and the way I see it.
Mm-hmm. So your beginning with in your interest and desire and talent in art was really one of the things that helped you to not only feel like you could communicate in a different way, but it helped you pursue your dreams and your passion.
Well, you've got to develop strengths. And another thing I learned very early on when I was in high school is working skills. I'm seeing a lot of kids today aren't learning basic skills. When I was 15, I was cleaning horse stalls. One of the things I learned from that is to learn how to work. Mm-hmm. And that's really super important. And I've spent years in the cattle and pig industry working on large meat plants. And I've worked with a lot of skilled tradespeople that I know are on the spectrum. I think one of the worst things the schools have done is taking out all the hands-on things, skilled trade stuff. We've got a gigantic shortage right now of diesel mechanics. Yeah. That's one job that's not going to get outsourced. And we've got to, you've got to expose kids to things that they can get interested in, like art or theater or diesel mechanics or some other thing.
Mm-hmm. Like have several different options, and an option that would fit their interest as well as their ability.
Well, there's kind of 3 kinds of minds, and I've talked about that in my TED Talk. I've talked about that in my newer book, The Autistic Brain. And I am a photorealistic visual thinker. Everything I think about is a picture. Mm-hmm. And that's helped me with work in animal behavior. Another kind of mind is the more pattern thinker, the mathematical thinker. And he's the engineer, the computer programmer. And then you have the person that thinks in words. Mm-hmm. People on the spectrum tend to be good at one thing and bad at something else. So you need to build up on the strengths. You're a 3rd grader good at math, don't make them do baby math, move them ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so really push them to go to what they're capable of and learn to be able to excel in that area. Tell us more about the photo.
And again, there's all different levels of autism. Then you've got some that are much more severe, and they're not going to be, doing engineering.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important to know that if you push them in the wrong direction, then they may not be successful. And it doesn't mean that they can't be successful. It just means that they're not in the area.
What you got to do with these kids is you got to stretch them. Mm-hmm. And you get on the milder end of the spectrum, especially where there's no speech delay. I worked with a lot of people professionally that my generation that I know are on the mild end of the autism spectrum. And in the 50s, table manners and social skills were taught in a much more structured way.
Yeah.
And that helped the kid that's socially awkward. And they ended up getting jobs. I have another book, Different, Not Less. And it's 14 older people on the spectrum in jobs, all different kinds of jobs. And they got diagnosed later in life because their relationships were a mess. And that's where a diagnosis was real helpful, helping them with the relationships. But you got to stretch these kids. You've got to work on expanding their world, but no sudden surprises. Sudden surprises scare, but give them choice. I'm going to get you out of the bedroom. You're not going to play video games all day. You can do karate or Boy Scouts. Give them some choice, or you can do a robotics club or some other activity.
I love that. I love that. Not letting them kind of enabling them not to be kind of stuck where they're at, but make sure that you're not just kind of forcing them in whatever direction you want to go.
No, give them choice. Give them choice. But one thing I was not allowed to do was become a recluse in my room. And the other thing that really helped me when I was in high school was my science teacher. He was absolutely a very, very critical mentor on getting me motivated to study science.
What was special about him that made the difference?
Well, he gave me interesting projects to do. And then that gave me a reason for knuckling down studying.
Yeah, and when you have that why, then there's a how.
That's right. That's right. But I'm seeing a lot of kids, a lot of smart kids, not getting taught basic skills. Like a 13-year-old who's fully verbal has never gone to the store and bought something himself. These are things that I learned when I was 7. So just learning basic skills.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of your successes, you're really accrediting it to just really being put into the position of working and high expectations, and you met those.
Well, that's right. That's right. And there's some things I can't do. Visual thinkers can't do algebra, and I'm really concerned about algebra requirement holding a lot of visual thinkers back, and they won't let you substitute geometry or some other math. And what saved me in college was finite math, which was mainly statistics. And I was able to do that class because in 67, when I was in college, that was the required course. And I was able to do it. There's some things they're not that good at, but we need to be building on the strength. And some of these kids are very good at art. And if they're good at art, they can major in industrial design. That's the art side of designing things. You have the engineering side of designing things, and then you have the art side. Think about the iPhone. An artist made the interface. The engineers had to make the inside of the phone work.
So yes, and when you talk about the thinking in pictures, it sounds like that's a gift, but something that people may not think of when they're working with a kid that's getting frustrated, say in algebra or something.
For some of these kids, I don't think they'll learn algebra. Just take them right straight to geometry. They'll probably be just fine.
Yeah.
But my art ability was always encouraged, and I was encouraged to do lots of different kinds of art. And the other big thing I'm seeing, especially with fully verbal kids, is they're not learning working skills. In my generation, 11-year-olds have paper routes. Well, we don't have paper routes anymore. So how about a paper route substitute? How about walk dogs for the neighbors? Somebody else's dog outside the family. You've got to take Mrs. Jones's dog out every morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, rain or shine, and give it a quality 20-minute walk. It is a job. They've got to learn that. I'd like to have them start learning it in middle school with things like walking dogs, jobs at their church, jobs at a community center, a farmer's market. And the instant they're legal age, I want them in the real economy so they can have a couple of summer jobs in the real economy. So when they graduate from high school, they're not jumping off the service cliff because they haven't learned work skills. I want to get that done before they graduate. But I also want to emphasize it's never too late. You have a 22-year-old that's sitting at home. Well, you need to just gradually wean them off the video games and introduce something else, like maybe taking an auto repair shop or doing some other thing.
Sure, yeah. And it seems like that would not only help build that skill building and that confidence in I can do this and I can participate, but also just that sense of purpose, like I'm helping and I'm
Well,
participating
that's right.
in the world.
That's absolutely right. Getting a sense of purpose. And I think a lot of therapists need to learn more about the business world. And I'd recommend some magazines you need to get in the library. How about Wired Magazine, Business Week, Fortune? Because kids get interested in stuff they get exposed to.
Yes.
And I think therapists need to get exposed to a lot more stuff in the business world. Another thing is, for a lot of these people, freelance work is good. And that's what I've done. But somebody needs to help them set up their corporation, set the business up, and show them how to do that.
So
I think a lot of therapists that are working, especially on vocational stuff, need to learn a whole lot more about the business world. And I'd like to see 4 or 5 business magazines, and have them reading them, and the students reading them too.
So that's a big hole that you're seeing where that piece is kind of being avoided, and that's like an access to help them to be successful.
Well, you read about interesting stuff and entrepreneurs starting businesses and things like this. And what I've found is that, everyone's sort of in their silo, and I figured out sort of like starting my own business. And I've said to a lot of parents that I'm a parent will come up to me and say, well, my kid's really good at art. And I said, do you have your art on your phone? You need to have a portfolio to show it off. Because the way I sold jobs is I'd show off my portfolio, drawings and pictures of things I had designed. I'd take out my drawings and they go, oh, you did that? Well, now you need to have it on your phone.
I love that.
Maybe a kid's good at photography. Well, you better have it on your phone and don't have it mixed in with the stupid cat pictures. Presentation matters.
Yes. And, too, what I'm thinking is if a parent did that, a lot of times the parents feel like overwhelmed with behavioral issues and things that are lacking. But to me, that really speaks to, hey, I'm proud of something that my child did. And then the kid gets that feeling of, hey, I'm worthy of praise.
The other thing, the kids got to learn, okay, like in art, my very first freelance job, I painted a sign for a beauty shop. And I had to paint a sign that a beauty shop would want. And I certainly couldn't decorate it with cattle or horses.
Yeah, so
you really have to learn how to use your ability to do something you want. And I sold the sign for $10. And back in the early 60s, that was a bunch of money.
Actually, now it's not too bad either. Well, it sounds like you were
about $75 now.
Yeah, it would definitely be more. It sounds like you were very, very driven, even at a young age, and definitely now.
Well, I was always and then one thing I learned at a young age, and I was not a good student when I was in high school, is I learned how to work. I was working on carpentry stuff, roofing, taking care of the horse barn. And I was proud of the fact that I ran the horse barn.
Yeah, strong work ethic.
Learning these work skills and learning them way before I graduated.
And it sounds like
it was real important.
Yeah, and if there would have been like a big focus on your only option is to go for a higher education at that point.
Well, I did. I did go for higher education. And I was a horrible student in high school. I was in a special boarding school. And then the last year and a half I was there, Mr. Carlock, my science teacher, came on the scene, and I kind of did 4 years worth of work in a year. And Mother talked the dean at a small college into letting me in on probation. And I did well in college. I knuckled down because I wanted to study. I wanted to become a scientist.
Oh, that gives me chills. And thinking of all that you've done with your passion and your work ethic and your knowledge of the lives that you've changed through that is incredible. And knowing that it was a struggle for you, I think that gives a lot of people.
Well, it wasn't easy. It was not easy. It definitely was not. And I'm very concerned today about video game addictions. And I can tell you right now that if video games had been around when I was in high school, I would have been Miss Addict. Absolutely.
So you would have been drawn to that too.
I would have been absolutely drawn to that rather than horses and roofing and taking care of the horse barn.
Yeah. So it would have robbed you.
The problem with these video game addictions is that these kids are not getting great jobs in the video game industry. If they were going on to great tech jobs, I would not be criticizing. But that's not what's happening. I'm hearing too often he's 21, I can't get him out of the basement. I'm hearing that way too often.
Yes, I hear that too. What do you, you had just said that pull them out of that environment and get them active kind of,
What we've got to do is get them doing something else. And I have another book I did with Deborah Moore called The Loving Push. And we reviewed the literature on the video game addictions, especially with kids with ASD.
Mm-hmm.
What you got to do is gradually replace it with something else. Like, how about some auto mechanics? And the reason why I'm pushing auto mechanics, there are hundreds of jobs right now for auto and diesel mechanics. They'll hire you as fast as you can get trained. Good, stable, well-paying jobs. You're not going to get outsourced. You're not going to get replaced by computers.
Yeah.
These are really good jobs. And what you want to do with a video game addict is slowly try to find something else he's interested in and slowly replace video games with auto mechanics.
Oh, I love that. My father was a diesel mechanic, so that's something that I think there's a lot of that hands-on piece. There's a lot of opportunity for people to get great work satisfaction out of it as well.
Well, I think that taking that stuff out of the schools was the worst thing they ever did.
Yeah.
Hands-on things totally saved me.
Now, if you could pick out one thing out of your childhood that you feel like was the most helpful, would it be that opportunity to really build that work ethic?
Well, that's in high school. Okay, as a little kid, the thing that really helped me was my mother kind of had a really good sense just how hard to push me. Mm-hmm. And I was in a very good early intervention program, old-fashioned 50s upbringing, to teach kids table manners and teach kids, I call it teachable moment. Mm-hmm. If I did something like stir a drink with my finger, they didn't scream no. They would just say, use the spoon. You give the instruction.
So they didn't get really emotional about it, but they...
No. She would just say, use the spoon. Or if I put my hands into mashed potatoes or something, she'd say, use the fork. She would just give the instruction. And that's the way manners were taught to kids in the 50s. Mm-hmm. This was that way for all children in the 50s. The 50s were kind of a combination of this manner, sit-down meals, be on time, and then in between that, go outside and play and be creative and take old wood and make things out of it.
Yes, and that's great for your mind and your body, but it gives you that opportunity to see what you're capable of. If you could pick one thing out of your childhood that wasn't so helpful, what would that be?
Well, nobody in the 50s understood the sensory issues, and I had to wear some scratchy clothes that I really hated, and sensory issues. But Mother did have a good sense that I didn't tolerate loud noise well. Mm-hmm. And so when we had to go on a ferry boat, they'd let me go in the cabin underneath so I wouldn't be blasted by the horn.
Sounds like she was very connected to your needs, like she intuitively knew what you needed.
Well, that's right. But the other thing in the 50s is that grown-ups everywhere corrected kids. You misbehaved in a store, the clerks corrected you. That's the way it was in the 50s.
Yeah. So it was more like a village.
That's right. Grown-ups corrected kids, little kids, no matter where you went. Grown-ups would correct you.
Was that helpful, or do you feel like...
Oh, yes, it was very helpful. And they didn't scream and yell. They would just give the instruction. I remember one time at Woolworths, I went behind the counter, and somebody said only the clerks are allowed behind the counter.
Oh, okay.
Again, that's giving the instruction.
Yeah, and not a way that's shameful or demeaning, just very clear.
They didn't scream and yell. They just said only the clerks can go behind the counter. Mm-hmm. And I still remember that. I see some 3-year-old at the airport run behind the ticket counter or something. I still remember the clerk in Woolworths telling me that only the clerks can go behind the counter.
Yeah, and it sounds like that piece of information was very helpful to you, and you didn't need it to be delivered in like an emotional way. You just needed to know it.
Well, and then I knew my 50 cents that I got every week, I could buy 5 comics with it. But if I wanted that 69-cent toy airplane, I had to save for 2 weeks. I also knew that you weren't allowed to stand at the comic book stand and read them in the store. Because a news agent would say, it's not a library. You start to read it, you're going to have to buy it.
So there's those clear boundaries of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable.
Very clear. That's right.
can you speak to the sensory issues a bit and just kind of explain what that was like growing up with what now is known as sensory processing disorder? Is that what you experienced?
Well, I had sound sensitivity and touch sensitivity.
Okay.
And then some kids have visual sensitivity. I did not have that problem. Sensory issues are extremely variable, from mild to really severe. There's an interesting paper you can download online that's called Environmental Enrichment is an Effective Treatment for Autism. It's an adjunct to other therapies. And what you do is you stimulate two senses at the same time, like maybe smell and touch.
Okay.
And you're always changing these two pairs of stimuli. And this paper, Environmental Enrichment is an Effective Treatment for Autism. You can download it. It's by Wu. Just remember these three key words: autism, environmental enrichment, and you can get the paper.
Okay, so Google that.
It's also in my Way I See It book.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm going to put a link to that. I'll find it on the web, and then I'll definitely put links to your books in my show notes so that the listeners could get them. If there's like one big thing that you would like parents and teachers to just really take away from hearing your story and your perspective and all this knowledge that you've gained.
You always have to stretch the child just outside the comfort zone. I like visual analogies. Do not chuck them in the deep end of the pool. No sudden surprises. But you always have to stretch.
Great.
And if you don't stretch, they don't develop. And there's kind of a knack to how much to stretch. Give them choices. You want to get them out of their room? Say you can do Boy Scouts or you can do karate. Give them some choices.
Yeah, I know that's good for behavioral too. Given choices can lessen behaviors. Now, did you experience any of the like a lot of the kids that come to me for help? They have intense behaviors in the beginning, and I think it's a lot to do with like the parents or the teacher's response or just feeling overstimulated. Is that something that you...
Well, you can get into situations where they just get totally overstimulated. And then I was bullied in high school. A lot of kids are getting bullied.
Yes.
And one other thing. Get these kids involved in shared interests because they're going to have friends where there's a shared interest. It could be art. It could be theater. It could be music. It could be robotics. It could be programming. It could be Star Wars Club. It could be a whole lot of different things.
So when you say shared interest?
Well, the people that I rode horses with did not tease me. That's what I mean by a shared interest. Okay, if the kid's in robotics, that's probably going to be a refuge away from teasing.
Yeah.
Or he's in theater, or band.
Yeah.
A lot of different things.
Oh, yes. Boy, that's a great piece of advice because then they have a part of their world where they feel accepted, they feel connected with people. And I know that social concern is a big piece of it.
Well, that's right. And that is where they can get shared interests.
Oh, I love that.
So get them involved with shared interests. One enterprising teacher had an autistic kid that really liked Star Wars. And she started a Star Wars club. Then the kid had friends. That was an easy thing to do.
Yes. And I think a lot of times it makes school fun for kids, and that could be the one reason why they want to go. I know there's at our school that I used to work at, they did like a Rubik's Cube club or
okay, good. Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, do those things. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be expensive. Rubik's Cube Club's not expensive.
No. And I in fact, I think people can donate them. It could actually be, just part of the school choice.
There's all kinds of stuff like that. I've often thought, how about start a small engine repair? 4-H has got some excellent materials for small engine repair for lawnmowers. Find a retired mechanic in the neighborhood and start fixing lawnmowers and having 11-year-olds work on the engines. See if they'd be interested in that. And one of the reasons I'm pushing that is because there's so many jobs that are available in that field.
Yeah, so lots of opportunities for success and purpose and being able to cultivate that skill level in an area where they could go on to, make that their profession in life.
Well, that's exactly right. Mm-hmm. And right now, electricians, plumbers, auto mechanics, welders, the old companies are just snapping them up as fast as they come out of the community college classes.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
But we need to get them interested in that before high school ends. What I have found a lot of careers is kids get interested in stuff they get exposed to in high school.
Yeah, it's like a window.
My cattle exposure was in high school. It wasn't in college.
Tell us about that. Well, I know that is that's your big passion. Speak to that for people that may not have heard your story.
Well, I've worked on improving cattle handling, how animals are treated at meat plants, and started out on my aunt's ranch because I was an Easterner originally. Mm-hmm. And then I went out to my aunt's ranch and never been in the Western U.S. before. And again, it's exposure. Yes. Kids get interested in stuff they get exposed to. Yeah. And we've got to work on getting them out of their rooms, these recluses in the room. My family, everybody drew a line at that. I was not allowed to do that.
And that's a big part of your success. I know that's almost like an epidemic, the video game. Not just people with...
And the other thing, the anxiety problems. And in my book, Thinking in Pictures, I talk about my successful use of antidepressants in a very low dose to control anxiety. There are a bunch of these kids that need to take just a little dab of Prozac or Zoloft. And you have to make sure you don't get too high a dose, because if you get too high a dose, you're going to get agitation and insomnia. And that's going to be a gigantic mess. And in Thinking in Pictures, I have a whole chapter where I describe my own experiences. Yeah. And even though that chapter is old now, it's still accurate. Those drugs have not changed much.
So you're saying just taking that edge off a little bit, but not dulling your emotions so much to where you, or getting to the point where you can't.
Well, the problem you have when you're using something like Prozac for anxiety, you give too high a dose, they're going to feel like they drank 20 cups of coffee and they're about ready to jump out of their skin.
Yeah, which creates a whole new set of problems. Yeah.
Well, and then that's a total mess. And anyone who's having anxiety problems needs to read Thinking in Pictures, the chapter that's called A Believer in Biochemistry. That will really help them out. And the visual thinkers, the artists, they're some of the worst for having anxiety problems.
Boy, that's really helpful. I'll put a link to that in the show notes too. I haven't actually read that book either. I'm going to order it and read it. I think that'd be helpful for therapists. I'm a therapist, be helpful for me to read, but as well as for parents and educators to really kind of understand.
Yeah, and the other book, Different Not Less, that's 14 old Aspies telling their own stories in their own words who got diagnosed later in life, all employed, but had relationship issues. And then I did another book with Sean Barron on the unwritten social rules. And a lot of counselors working with teenagers and adults have found that book to be helpful. Each book sort of has its use. Yeah, Unwritten Rules of Social Relationships with Temple Grandin and Sean Barron. The way I see it, that's for little kids. Thinking in Pictures for artists and people that are anxious. The Different Not Less is older people telling their stories. Loving Push, if you got a video game problem, that's the book they need to be reading.
Oh, that's good. I think that'd be helpful for parents that just have children that have that, like you said, a recluse in the room with the video games.
Well, we've got to prevent that. And then if you do have one, you've got to gradually wean them off the video games. And you don't totally ban it, but it needs to be strictly limited. TV watching in the 50s for me was limited to 1 hour a day.
Which is probably the equivalent of video games for many children.
That's right. Exactly.
And I think you just made a really good point about don't totally ban it, because if you totally shut it off.
Don't totally ban it, no. Yeah. But it needs to be really controlled. And what I'm seeing happening is I'll see a dad who's an engineer, got a good job. He likes to play a lot of video games, but he's going to work for 8 hours a day. And Junior's getting totally addicted, not learning any engineering. See, the difference is that the dad is old enough that when he was in college and when he was a teenager, the video games weren't around.
Yeah.
And Dad plays lots of video games, but Dad still goes to work and keeps his job.
Yes, and that summer when he's gone, and the kid's on the video game the whole time when he's gone, it's taken away from his life. It's like robbing him of the opportunity.
No, we've got to control it, and some people might call me an old fogey, but I'm not seeing good outcomes. Where they're getting jobs in the video game industry. That's just not now. Sometimes it happens. There are some kids where they do get a good job in the video game industry. But then there's 10 others that just are staying in their room addicted.
Yeah. And I think when you say addicted, it does create those neural pathways in the brain that kind of lends itself to other addictions as well. That's why.
Well, I'm not going to make any speculations about that, but they just can't get them out of the room. And the other big problem I'm seeing with smart older kids is they're not learning working skills. I'm seeing them graduating from high school. They've never had a job.
Yeah.
Well, they need to, the research is showing you need to have 2 regular jobs, 2 summer jobs in the real economy before you graduate from high school. Or if you're in college and you haven't had a job, well, let's get some summer jobs.
Oh, that's a good point.
Or some internships. Unpaid internships are fine as long as they're on a schedule and you're expected to do a job.
Yeah. Then you can hone that work ethic, get that sense of purpose and the experience.
I mean, you've got to work on the work ethic. And then by the time I got out, I was motivated to make a really nice sign for a beauty shop.
Mm-hmm.
Get paid $10 for it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much, Dr. Grandin, for talking to us and sharing your story and all your tips and advice. I cannot wait to share this with everyone and just kind of let your information change a lot of lives out there. Thank you.
Well, I just want to see kids being successful. And the other thing we got to remember about autism is it's such a broad spectrum. Going from famous artist Einstein to be labeled autistic to maybe Thomas Edison.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other end, you've got somebody who can't dress themselves. They're not going to be fixing cars. See, this is one of the problems.
Yes.
With the diagnosis is it's gotten so broad. And with the kids that are fully verbal, there's tons of overlap with ADHD genetically. Tons and tons of overlap.
Yes, the comorbid diagnosis. I think, you know, what is it? It's almost like 65%. I can't remember the exact number, but it's very, very common. And also, too, I think, and I don't know, I can't speak to the accuracy of this, but that people saying that oppositional defiant disorder, but I think a lot of times it could be just a product of the child gets overstimulated and
they can get overstimulated. The other thing is sometimes just a wise old teacher knows what to do. I was a kid who was the worst kid in the school in a 6th grade, and an old nun in a wheelchair handled him. I think he would have been labeled oppositional defiant, and she just put him to work, made him her assistant. He had to clean the blackboard, clean the classroom, push her wheelchair around, and he turned him around and gave him a job. She gave him a job.
Yeah. So if there's
he could be proud of, a job he could be proud of.
If there's one big theme of your message, it seems like just giving the kids a purpose and a job to really kind of build that work ethic and that sense.
Give them a purpose. And I was proud of the fact that when I was in high school, I cleaned 8 stalls every day. I basically ran a horse barn. Now, I did not do any of the financial stuff, but I put them in and out. I fed them. I fixed the barn when they kicked a hole in the wall. And I did all of the horse barn running except the buying the feed and things like that.
Sounds like a lot of work, but it sounds like it gave you an awesome childhood as well. And
the school introduced me to it because they kind of saw me holing up in my room, and the headmaster, introduced me to the idea of cleaning the stalls and taking care of the horses. And once I got started doing it, it really caught on.
Oh, I love that. And you said it was a boarding school?
Yeah, I was at a boarding school. I was a horrible student. I got thrown out of 9th grade for throwing a book at a girl who called me a retard. And
boy, that sounds like a pretty hurtful statement. I went to boarding school for
kids with problems. Did no studying at all. But boy, I did a lot of carpentry work. I did a lot of roofing, and I did a lot of horse barn and riding.
So you got a great education, not necessarily in books, but in life, it sounds like.
Well, actually, when I went into boarding school, my reading level was real good. I was reading at high school level. When I was in third grade, I was not reading. Mother taught me to read with phonics. Some kids are a phonics learner. Other kids are a whole word learner. I was a phonics learner. So my reading level in high school was good, and my writing skills were good. I'd already kind of gotten that worked on when I was younger, because the teachers would copy edit my work. Horrible at math, but actually reading and writing I was decent at in high school. And even though I was a horrible student, my writing skills were better than what I'm seeing in some college students today. And I think the reason for that is, in my generation, I'd write something in sixth grade class or fifth grade class, and the teacher would mark it up with a red pen, and I had to go back and correct it. It's called copy editing when you grow up. Yeah,
so is that high expectations, we're not going to take any less than what we know you're capable
of. They'd mark the homework all up, and then I had to do it over again. That's how I learned how to write, because the teacher marked it up.
Yeah.
So even though I was a horrible student in high school, I already had really decent reading skills, really good reading skills, and my writing skills were pretty decent.
Oh, I love that. Boy, wow, you have an amazing story. You're an amazing person.
Well, and I had a lot of people that helped me. Let's go over that. It's my mother. Then in my elementary school, very, very good headmaster and head teacher. And then high school, my science teacher was real critical. Ann out at the ranch. And, there were some really good people that helped me.
So that support system.
And I can't emphasize enough the importance. Good teachers, they can really turn a kid around.
Oh, yes, that's so true.
And the other thing that helped me was all the hands-on things. We had art class, we had plays, we had, so many schools have taken that stuff out. If I hadn't had art class when I was in elementary school, we did art and sewing. I loved those classes. Well, they had all kinds of, I did woodworking in elementary school. I did sewing, and I did art. Making stuff.
Yeah, with your hands. And
that's right.
Translated into really just being successful. I think if the opposite were true, where you were stuck in your room and you didn't have that push to get out, then it could have been a whole different story.
That push to get out. Mother, when I had the chance to go to my aunt's ranch, Mother gave me a choice. A week, I could stay a week, or I could stay all summer, but not going wasn't one of the choices. And once I got out there, I loved it, and I stayed all summer.
Oh, that's great. Sounds like you have some really good childhood memories too. Some tough ones, but some good ones as well. And I know, we talk about the kids with the video games. Now it's hard to get all those good memories if you spend all your time in the room in the video games. So.
Well, and they're not having good outcomes, and there seems to be something about ASD that just makes them get addicted. Because if you look at some of the research, you take kids in general. There's a lot of kids that can kind of take them or leave the video games. But there's something with the ASD kid, and I can remember as a very young kid, I loved watching cartoons. There was something about how the drawings moved that was just sort of hypnotic.
Yeah,
and I think that has something to do with it.
Yeah, when you look at the hit video games with the graphics and everything, could be.
And I think there's something with ASD and video game addictions that go together.
Yeah, boy, that'd be some good
research. There's some research on that too. There is research on that.
Okay.
And we reviewed some of that research in the Loving Push book.
Oh, I'll have to take a look at that. Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that connection, but it makes total sense that there's something there that's just making it even a stronger hold.
There's something with ASD that just makes the video game stuff worse.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I know that you are so busy, and I feel so honored that you're on the show.
Well, thank you very, very much.
All right. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. It was such an honor to chat with her. She is so very amazing. You can find the show notes to this episode at parentingintherain.com. And if you haven't done so yet, please join us in our Facebook group. It's at Parenting in the Rain Community. You can just do a search in Facebook, and there's also a Facebook page for it too. Now, if you're a child therapist, be sure to check out Play Therapy Community, and I have a webpage for that, playtherapycommunity.com, and also a Facebook group for that as well. If you're an iTunes user, please subscribe, rate, and review. I would love that if you could be able to get a notice every time that a new episode's out so you don't miss any. And I read all of your reviews and your messages. Thank you so much, everyone. Well, thank you so much for listening. And until next time, take care.